where we find our strength and our community feeling. I feel safe inside. I feel very comforted inside by the congregation and by the history and by the legacy. But of course, there have been moments when I felt less safe outside the synagogue.
Last December, protesters assembled across the road from the Great Synagogue in Sydney's CBD. It was hosting an event to mark the 100th anniversary of the Israeli Institute of Technology. An Israeli Defence Forces reservist was due to speak.
This was a lockdown, and people were only allowed to leave in groups of 8 or 10 to minimise attention drawn.
Months earlier, activists had carried a Sanction Israel banner past the synagogue.
We're not the Israeli embassy, so why should there be a Sanction Israel banner outside a place of worship for Australian Jews? I would certainly decry any protest which took place near a mosque, which was related to the events in Israel or Gaza.
After the December protest, the state government announced it was considering reforms.
I think that that's bordering on anti-Semitism, because the suggestion is that if you're of the Jewish faith, that somehow you're held culpable for the actions of a government overseas.
In February, the Parliament passed laws restricting protest near places of worship. It became an offence to block or harass someone accessing a church, synagogue, mosque or temple. And police were given expanded powers to move on demonstrations held inside or nearby.
Anyone protesting in or near a place of worship could be moved on by police, even if the protest had nothing to do with that place of worship.
The Palestine Action Group did not organise the protest outside the Great Synagogue, but since October 7, it's been running its own protests regularly through the CBD.
And we absolutely must keep mobilising.
Within weeks of the reforms, organiser Josh Lees challenged the power for police to move on protesters in court.
Of course, any protest that happens in the city is going to be near a place of worship, because all through the city are churches.
Can you understand why worshippers would be intimidated even if the protest was peaceful?
Well, no, there were no worshippers in questions. They weren't going to worship. This was dishonestly portrayed as though this was an anti-Semitic event. The event happening at the synagogue was a political event hosting an ex-IDF soldier.
Last week, he won.
They are invalid. They've been ruled out by the court.
The Supreme Court of New South Wales declared the provision giving police move-on powers was invalid. Josh Lees argued it was geographically loose and could apply to protests which aren't obstructing worshippers, but are simply close to or passing by a place of worship. The court agreed, Justice Anna Mitchellmore ruling it impermissibly burdens the freedom of political communication implied in Australia's constitution.
It's a victory for everyone in this state who celebrates and tries to defend our democratic rights against these kinds of attacks.
We do not infringe on people's right to protest, but it can't infringe on someone else's right to enjoy the city or practice their religion free from vilification.
The Premier says the decision is disappointing.
We're not planning on appealing.
Will you change the wording of the provision to avoid the constitutional issue?
Potentially, we're looking at it.
We'd had a series of anti-Semitic attacks over the summer, some extremely serious.
Stephen Lawrence is a Labor MP and outspokenly pro-Palestine.
This was not an anti-Semitic protest at a synagogue. There were Jewish people protesting at that event. I'm really concerned that this got twisted in a way, got injected into the political debate, was part of the environment in which these laws found broad support in the Parliament.
He's also a barrister. When the party room considered the reforms, he warned his colleagues the law may be unconstitutional.
Fundamental problem with the move on power that's been struck down was that there didn't need to be a nexus with the place of worship, except that it had to be near the place of worship.
Some of your colleagues warned this legislation might be unconstitutional. Why didn't you listen to them?
Oh, well, I mean, I think some people warned that the entire thing would be struck out in all circumstances, and that didn't prove to be correct.
While the provision that gave police move-on powers has been struck down, it is still an offence for protesters to block or harass worshippers. No one has been charged with it yet, but Stephen Lawrence says it too could be open to a future challenge.
Child abuse victims of a faith-based institution might want to, and indeed have in the past, have protests at places of worship. So there would be still a live question, I think, if someone sought to use the implied freedom to argue that that criminal offence is unconstitutional.
However peaceful the protests have been near the Great Synagogue, some in the congregation have chosen to practice their faith elsewhere.
On one occasion, a family which was holding their bat mitzvah when their daughter turned 12 decided, for reasons I entirely respect, to transfer that celebration to a different synagogue.
But as competing rights are balanced, both sides agree these freedoms must be preserved.
Of course, I defend people's right to practice their religion.
The right of protest is essential in a liberal democracy, and I would absolutely defend it.